So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our safety webinar on protecting your CM-ET Lodestar hoist in harsh conditions. My name is Gisela Clark. I'm the Senior Digital Marketing Specialist for Columbus McKinnon and will be your host for today's webinar. Presenting today will be Brian Leister. Brian is a Senior Technical Trainer with Columbus McKinnon, specializing in entertainment rigging, rope access, and hoist maintenance. He has 14 years of experience as a rigging professional in the entertainment industry and 10 years of industrial rope access experience. The advancement and sharing of knowledge are Brian's greatest passions. He values his role as a trainer as his greatest privilege. He's trained over 60 rope access technicians across all levels of SPRAT certification. Supporting Brian will be Nick Fleming, Business Development Specialist for our CM Entertainment Division. Nick has been a contributor to the entertainment technology community for 10 plus years. He served in the management role overseeing rigging at a large theme park and owned his own rigging business that served as a warranty service center for CM. Nick joined Columbus McKinnon back in 2017. So before we begin today, I just want to go over a few quick things, and here is information which we'll show again at the end for how you can reach either Brian, Nick, or myself if there's anything that you need after the webinar. So before we begin, there's just a few things we'd like to cover. First off, we are recording the session today, and the recording link will be added to our YouTube channel. Look for an email to follow with a recording within the next day or two. Everyone in attendance will receive a link. Everyone is in listen-only mode today, so we encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A pane on the right-hand side of your page that several of you have already used to let us know where you are in the world today, so thank you for that. We're going to take 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions, and we will not get off the call until every question is addressed that we can answer on the call. Lastly, after each webinar, we select one of the questions to be used in our blog the following week. So if your question is chosen, we'll send you some kind of CMCO promotional item and as a thanks. So ask a lot of questions, and yours may be chosen for our blog article to follow. So thank you for your attention, and now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Brian so then we can get started. Brian?
Hi, thank you. So we have our disclaimer here. The information on this training is intended for general information purposes only and is not a substitute for review of the applicable government regulations, standards, and should not be construed as legal advice or opinion by Columbus McKinnon Corporation, OSHA, or any other of the presenters appearing before you. Attendees with specific questions should refer to the cited regulations or consult with an attorney. Let's go to the next page, please. All right, so with that out of the way, we're going to talk about IP ratings. We're going to look at 2 different IP ratings that we have on our hoists, IP54 and the newer IP66 for electric chain hoists. We're going to discuss some steps for frequent inspections and some good practices to help maintain those, and some other alternative means for protecting your hoist from the elements. Next. All right, so first we're going to talk about what is an IP rating. And what IP actually stands for is International Protection Code. We usually refer to it as ingress protection. Basically protecting the internal electronics from water, dust, intrusion of solids like tools and fingers and things like that. And we're only talking about the electrical parts here. We're not talking about the lift wheels or the chain guides or any of that kind of stuff that's also subject to exposure to the elements. We're only talking about protection of the wiring and electrical components. Next.
So Brian, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but for the IP66 rating, is that only focused on electrical enclosures, or could there be an IP66 rating that would cover gears or anything like that, and we just, for our particular hoist, it's only covered electrical enclosures?
Yeah, that's correct. We're just talking about what the enclosure, the framing, the covers, what they protect the electrical components against, not the mechanical components.
So mechanical components would not be covered in IP66, correct?
Correct, but we will talk about some ways that you can help protect those mechanical components as well.
Great.
Next. All right, so IP comes in a lot of different code classifications. The number after the IP, we say 54 or 66. It's actually like 2 different numbers. So it's 5 and 4 and 6 and 6, not 54 or 66. That's just an abbreviated way of saying it. And that first digit is covering the level of protection provided by the enclosures against access to hazardous parts, like exposed electronics and things. So at the level of 0, we're talking about no protection whatsoever. Our IP54 hoist, which we started coming out with around the 50th anniversary, around 2005 to 2007, those ones have protection against most dust. It will protect against dust, but it might allow dust in, but not an amount that is going to damage or interfere with the operation of the electrical. Our IP66 hoists are dust tight, so there's no dust getting in through the covers whatsoever as long as it is properly maintained. The second digit to your IP rating is water. That's the more important one because we don't like water mixing with our electricity. It never comes out good. So with an IP54, the older hoists, those are going to be protected against splashing of water. There are more details if you look up IP classifications on the internet. You can find more detailed information about like how much water, how much pressure, and how much time they actually conduct these tests for. IP66, that second digit again is water. So with a grade of 6, that means powerful water jets. Like more than a garden hose, but not quite an industrial pressure washer. So somewhere in between, maybe like a commercial grade pressure washer would be a good example of IP66 rating. And that's going to protect from water intrusion. Next. So we came out with the IP66 ratings for the new generation Lodestars first. October 5th, 2015 is when we started making our new generation hoists with the IP66 rating. And we followed that later with, in August of 2016, by retrofitting all of our classic for IP66 ratings as well, because the classics remain very popular even to this day. So both grade or both versions of those hoists, V1s and V2s, small and large frame, both in classic and new generation, are going to have that IP66 rating if they were manufactured after the dates that you see on the screen.
So, Brian, for those that are looking at their classic hoists and may not really understand if their hoist was made before or after the 2015 or 2016 date, with our serial numbers, it's pretty easy to tell when your hoist was manufactured, and I'll help you out as best I can verbally here. So, if you look at the serial number on your hoist, it usually starts with a letter, and then there's 5 digits of numbers, and then there's 2 other additional letters at the end. Those 2 other additional letters at the end dictate when that hoist was made. So if you're looking at classics for the August 15th, 2016 date, basically if that first letter, or excuse me, I guess I should say second to last letter on the serial number is a Y or a Z, it's definitely the IP66. If it's an X, then you have to look at the second letter, and the second letter would be anything W or after that. So that's for classics. For next gens, it was made a little bit earlier. So for next gens, if that second to last letter is an X, Y, or Z, it definitely falls in that criteria. But if it's before that, you have to look at the second letter, which would be L. Anything after L. So. And there's a good little cheat sheet for those that need it. You can shoot me or Brian a note. There's a great little cheat sheet that kind of gives you a rundown of exactly what letters count for what date a hoist is made, and we can help you out with that.
And a quick note about the identification of the serial numbers. We no longer use the letters I or O, as in Indiana or Ontario, in our serialization. So if you see something that looks like an I or an O, it is a number, not a letter.
Quick tip of the day, I like it.
Next, please. All right, so some of the differences that we have with the IP66s, what we're looking at here on screen on the left side is a classic lift wheel, all right, the 4-pocket lift wheel. The new generation hoists are going to have a 5-pocket lift wheel. But one of the things that the IP66 versions have in common are that they are going to have these little rubber O-rings on either side of the lift wheel that you can see on the screen there, and they're also going to have O-rings around the bearings. So that helps because that part of the hoist is always going to be exposed. That's where the chain comes in, goes around the lift wheel. All right, there's no way for us to seal that up and allow chain to travel through. So what we've done is we've created a seal on either side of the lift wheel bearings, both the interior circumference and the exterior circumference, to help prevent water and dust from migrating from the lift wheel area into the rest of the hoist where the electrical areas are. So you can see that diagram breakdown there on the right side. There are O-rings on the outside of those bearings. There's O-rings on the inside of the bearings, which are actually attached to the lift wheel shaft itself. That's one of the several other modifications that have been made for the IP66 on both classics and new gens. Next. Another modification that we've made is we've added gaskets to several layers of the hoist. So anywhere there's a seam between frame pieces or cover pieces, there's going to be a continuous gasket. And that means a gasket that does not have a break in it. As a former motor technician, a lot of the time we didn't want to disconnect the wires from the break end. So what we would do is we would snip the gasket so we could get it around the wiring. Just a note for any motor techs out there, if you want to maintain that IP66 rating, that gasket has to be continuous. You can't cut it and move it around the wires anymore. You're going to have to disconnect those wires, slide the new gasket over them to help keep that seal intact. We also have gaskets inside the middle of the hoist. You can see a picture here of one side of where the lift wheel bearing is, and there are gaskets that house or that go around that entire cavity on both the left and right side. That way the wiring that comes up through the hoist is protected from any kind of debris or water or other liquids that are going to get into the lift wheel area. There's also a gasket between the brake end cover and the back frame and the rotor end cover in the frame to help protect as well. And those gaskets are the kind that you're going to need to replace on a regular basis, because during our inspections we frequently will remove those end covers. And if those end cover gaskets are compressed to the point where they don't re-expand, back into their original shape, then it means it's time to replace the gasket.
So, Brian, are there any gaskets that are interchangeable with the classic IP66 and the next-gen IP66?
There are a few gaskets that you can add, however, not all of them. Let's see, the back frame gasket on the IP66 will not fit the IP54 version, and the IP66 gaskets between the V1 or small frame gear and motor housing will not work on the IP54 versions of that same hoists, because we modified the housings for those gaskets to make the IP66 change. So you won't be able to fit all the same gaskets between an IP54 to a 66, but the best thing to do is talk to your distributor, your CM distributor, to find out which gaskets you can add to your hoist. And next. Another big modification, and one that I really like when it comes to taking the hoist apart, is that the cord grips are now secured to the frame there. So you can pull that cover off, the brake end cover, without having to deal with the power and control cords getting in the way or getting pinched or anything like that. They're hardwired right to a terminal block on the brake end. And what we've done is secured them with high performance composite, and that prevents water from getting inside when it's in the motor down position, a position for the hoist that we commonly use in entertainment, where the chain goes up and the motor body is on the bottom. So another thing that we've done is the cord grips have a rubber seal that tightens around the cords to provide a 360-degree watertight protection. And the grips are designed to fit snug against the back of the frame of the gearbox assembly to prevent water from getting in. Now, they will feel more rigid and more secure, which is great, but I will remind everybody that they are still not handles. Do not pick up the hoist by the cords, no matter how secure they are. If you start to do that, one, you're going to damage the cords and the wiring, but also you're going to start to bend that plastic, and you're going to open up gaps where water can get in. So again, the cords are not handles. Next. Nylon washers. I urge everybody who is in the field or in the shop that's going to take the end covers off, whether it's the rotor end cover or the brake end cover, to have a nice little bag of these nylon washers. They're a little difficult to see in the picture. However, what you can see are the 4 screws that hold the brake end cover on. And what those screws are sealed with are these little nylon washers that sit in there. And then we tighten the screw down to the appropriate torque value. That creates a seal. I would say with the older versions of the hoist, most of the water intrusion came from here. The water would get in under these screw heads because it was just a metal washer or metal split washer there that allowed water to get in, or they get in through the cords. The power and control whips was another place water would get in. So we fixed both of those issues with the IP66. But they only remain fixed if you have good washers and gaskets on the hoist. And next. All right.
Excuse me, Nick, could you mute yourself briefly? Thank you. There's some background noise coming in. Thanks.
What's that?
I just asked if Nick could mute himself. There's some background noise coming in.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
So we've talked about some of the differences that the newer hoists, both classics and new generation hoists, have with the IP66 rating and how we've achieved that rating. That rating is achieved through testing. So we send that hoist out, that new design, and it gets tested. But it's up to the end user to be able to make sure they maintain that rating. So one of the things that you can do to help maintain that rating is perform your frequent inspections. It depends on what service category you have the hoist at. You can find these service categories in the ANSI standard E1.6-2 under the ESTA TSP or Technical Standards program. And you can also find this information in our manuals for the entertainment version of the hoist. And the frequent inspections are just a quick check that doesn't need to be documented. You can certainly document them if you feel like you want to keep track of the hoist. But in those frequent inspections, what we're looking at is to make sure that the brake is operating. So we're checking the brake for proper operation. We want to make sure it opens and closes and that it holds the load. Hooks and attachment hardware, we're going to take a look at those. All right, they're not electrical based, so nothing really to do with IP66, but it's part of our frequent inspection. Checking the load chain for adequate lubrication. Again, the load chain, not electrical, not part of IP66. However, it is exposed to the elements. So if you lubricate that chain on a regular basis, clean the chain when it gets really nasty, then you're going to protect that chain for a much longer period of time. Right? We all know chain is expensive, and an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure when it comes to that. If you maintain that chain, lubricate it, inspect it regularly, and take good care of it, it's going to last for a very, very long time. We also want to make sure that we have proper reeving and no capsizing of the chain when it's in a double reeved orientation, where the chain comes up through the hoist, through a block, and back down to the hoist. We want to make sure there's no twisting going on there. We should always check our limit switches. So you run the hoist all the way in, all the way out. Make sure your upper and lower limits are working. That is an electrical function of the hoist. So those we want to make sure are protected by keeping our gaskets intact. Evidence of lubricant leakage. If you see anything leaking out of the hoist like grease or oil or anything like that, that would be a good sign, or actually a bad sign, that your IP66 rating is in jeopardy. And I would get that hoist to a warranty service center as soon as possible to get that corrected. Your electrical cords, the grommets, connectors, cables, control station enclosure, all of those things are subject to damage and wear. They are exposed to all kind of different things. So we want to make sure that those are intact. In fact, I would put that at the top of this list. Before you plug in the hoist, take a look at those cords, take a look at the connectors, make sure there's nothing there that's going to expose you to any kind of a shock. And then, of course, any signs of impact damage to the housing, any kind of cracked covers, that's going to void out that IP66 rating as well. So, you know, don't drop the hoist. Make sure it's in a good road case, nice and secure. But if you see any kind of damage to the housing, definitely get that hoist out of service, take it to a warranty service center and get it fixed.
Brian, I'd like to go ahead and do a quick polling slide. So what we'd like to ask is, can you retrofit an IP54 hoist to meet IP66 criteria? Is the answer yes or no? Are you all able to see it? Yes, I can see you're voting now. Perfect. So again, can you retrofit an IP54 hoist to meet IP66 criteria? Yes or no? Wow, Brian, we are completely split. We're at like 48% say yes, 54% say no. So 52, yeah, it's toggling between 50-50. So I'll wait another couple minutes. So another couple seconds. Okay. All right, Brian, as of right now, after almost 1 minute, about 70% have voted. It looks like 40% say yes, 60% say no. What is the answer?
Well, that is a really good split right there, because the answer is both. Yes, technically, you could take an IP54 hoist and retrofit it to meet an IP66 rating. One thing about IP66 ratings are, though, the rating comes from the testing, right? So you would have to have that hoist tested under the criteria of the IP66 rating to verify whether or not it meets that rating. So any modifications that you make, you know, you would have to have it tested for that. However, if you wanted a quick list of parts, it wouldn't be cost effective, in my opinion, to retrofit a hoist, because you're going to replace the lift wheel, the back frame, the end cover, the drive shaft assembly, O-rings, rotor shafts, cords, the cord grips, the back frame cover, gasket, some of the bearings, the motor housing itself, the gear housing, and the intermediate pinion. So there's not a lot of parts left that you'd be able to keep. So I would, my ballpark would say you'd spend a pretty good amount of money retrofitting that hoist. It would be a lot better if either to get a new hoist, which I fully endorse, or if you're gonna, if you want to keep that hoist protected, we will talk about some other ways you can help protect that hoist from the elements.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And we'll move on to the next slide.
All right, so maintaining your hoist. We talked about frequent inspections, all right, and maybe you should add some steps to your frequent inspections if you know your hoists are going to be used in what we call a severe service condition. Severe service is anything outside of normal service. This is using the hoist outdoors with exposure to the elements. This is near pyrotechnic effects, things like that. And what I would recommend is on a regular basis, to open up that brake end and motor end cover and check for moisture, signs of oxidation. Okay, if you're using that hoist in a very humid environment, let's say you have an IP66 rated hoist. You've never opened it up yet, right? It's brand new. So you know the rating should be intact and everything. And you have it outdoors in a high humid environment where temperatures fluctuate dramatically, like Florida or something like that. Whatever keeps water out is also going to keep moisture in. So condensation still has a chance to build inside of that frame cover because of the differences with the temperatures. So it is a good idea to go ahead and open that up from time to time, maybe on a weekly basis, monthly basis. It all depends on the severity of the conditions in which the hoist is being used. And checking that brake end and motor end cover. Checking your brakes, your rotor, looking for any signs of oxidation or rust. Another great idea is to have some gaskets and washers handy in your road box or your work box, or definitely in your shop. And when you replace those gaskets, whenever you open up the covers, go ahead and throw a new gasket on. That's going to help protect your IP66 rating as well. And one of the things that I see most often is that people don't torque their fasteners properly. So, and when I say they don't torque them properly, I think it's more on the side of they torque them too tightly, all right? With the frame end covers, the brake cover, the rotor cover, people will sit there and really tighten down on that. And if you look in our manual, you'll see that the torque values for those fasteners are pretty low, right? It's just as important to not over torque a fastener as it is to not under torque the fastener. So you want to torque it to the exact amount, because we've done testing on these things. We know how much pressure the gasket should be seeing. So we've assigned torque values for every single fastener in that hoist. And I would strongly recommend that you adhere to those torque values whenever you're putting things together.
Yeah, and Brian, to add on to that, really you're taking these extra steps, not necessarily to make sure CM held up their end of the promise that they're IP66, but you're really investigating to make sure that human error didn't come into play on the last inspection, or there might be a cracked a body or something like that that would let water in. So it's, for those that have been working on hoists a long time, you guys understand it's really easy to get a little fast with putting on a gasket or something, and it's just not quite seated properly, or maybe the screw's not fastened down all the way, so there's water intrusion happening. So again, it's just as much inspecting for human error as it is making sure that there's no issues with the hoist itself.
Yes, definitely. There was a show that we had to come out at 4 o'clock in the morning once a week to check on the hoist, because they were being used outdoors in Florida, exposed to the elements in the middle of summer. And in Florida it rains like almost every day during the summer, and temperatures fluctuate, high humidity, and also next to a lot of very oxidizer heavy pyrotechnics. So we had a call once a week to come out at 4 in the morning to oil and clean the chains and check the brake end covers and all that stuff to make sure that these hoists weren't getting damaged over time.
Yeah,
so it's really important to keep an eye on these.
Yeah, and as you said in a couple times in the past, what keeps the water out keeps humidity in. So you got to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do on a pretty consistent basis.
All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so here's a pretty picture. We've got a brake, AC brake from a 2 horsepower old classic. So this is not an IP66 hoist right here. But this is a sign of extreme neglect. I personally worked on this hoist and had recommended a full replacement of all of the parts that you pretty much see on the screen here. The limit switch assembly, the brakes, all of it. When I got this hoist out of the box and did my frequent inspection on it and then powered it up, the brake was seized shut with rust. This hoist was used outdoors and had not been serviced in more than 5 years, maybe even 10. So you want to open up that brake end and motor end cover and check for moisture and signs of oxidation. If you catch it early, you can prevent it from spreading. And replace the gaskets and washers as well.
So Brian, this is obviously an extreme example, but if someone finds rust inside their hoist on some of these parts, can it be cleaned or repaired and still be in use, or should it be replaced?
Well, most of the parts can be cleaned, with the exception of the brake discs. So your brake discs, those cannot be cleaned at all. All you can do with those, if they are really nasty and rusted, I would say to go ahead and replace them. But all the parts that are just bare metal, just steel, then you could wire brush those, or maybe a very fine grit sandpaper, and get some surface rust off. But what you're looking for there, what's going to tell you to throw it away and replace it, is pitting. So if you see a loss of material, a loss of thickness or diameter in a piece of material, or little pits, little dots, like someone just took a really small punch and made a bunch of little divots in there from the rust, that would be a sign that you need to get rid of that piece of equipment and replace it.
Great.
On that particular AC brake, I was able to restore about 3 or 4 pieces of it, like the intermediate plate, the base plate. Those were both replaceable. I cleaned up the springs. Of course, I replaced the brake stud nuts on the top. I cleaned up the limit switch, re-oiled it, got that replaced. So there's a lot of stuff. Even with that much damage, I was able to restore. But the brake discs were shot, and the brake armature piece had to be replaced as well, because that brake armature that creates the field around the coil, that's made of laminated sheets of steel. So several really thin pieces of steel that are compressed together and riveted. And what happens when you get extreme rust in there is the rust gets in between those laminations, and it starts to create a void in there. And what that does is it negates or impairs the brake coil's ability to create a stable electromagnetic field, which is how the brake operates. So once you start to see that separation inside those laminations, it's over for that piece. But you can catch it early and get it cleaned up if you're diligent with your inspections. Next. This one looks pretty bad too. Good old Dave Carmack sent me this picture not too long ago.
Wow.
And right now we're talking about IP66 and electrical parts, but here we're looking at the gears, right? The gears are in the heart of the hoist. And you can tell by the coloration in the grease that water had been sitting and pulling in this area for quite a long time. So this doesn't look like a hoist that was being operated on a regular basis. This is probably a standby, or maybe it sat in a box with water collected inside the gears. But replacing the gaskets and torquing the fasteners to the correct value probably could have prevented a lot of the rust and everything that you see in here. The primary gear, the one that is on the left side, that one could probably be salvaged as long as there was no loss of material. And the load protector or the clutch mechanism, this is a classic, by the way, because your load protector is inside the gears. On your new gen, your load protector or clutch is going to be outside the gearbox over by your rotor, coupling the rotor and the drive shaft. But this load protector, I didn't have hands on this hoist, so I can't tell you the exact conditions it was in. But just by looking at the picture, I would say replace that load protector, because you don't know, the load protector is a clutch mechanism inside of it. You don't know if that rust propagated into the interior mechanical components of the clutch. So I would replace that. Next. Another great way to protect your hoist, whether it's IP66 or IP54 or no IP at all, is to put some kind of a rain cover on it. If you're going to use it outdoors, several of our distributors provide different rain covers. So there's a lot of different options out there for whether you have the hoist inverted or motor up or motor down, whatever way you have the hoist operating, there's a rain cover out there that can help protect it. And even if I had a brand new IP66 hoist, I'd put a rain cover on it if I'm going to use it outdoors. It just helps protect it over a period of time from the elements. And contact a CM distributor to find the rain protectors that are going to be right for your application. So we can go to the next one.
Okay.
My top recommendation for anything that you're going to do with that hoist, that hoist is an investment, and we know that they last a very, very long time if they're properly maintained. That's why we've set up several different warranty service centers throughout the country, and there are 14 of them listed here on the page. So no matter where you live, you can probably find one that can help you out. I would set up a periodic inspection and preventative maintenance program with one of these warranty service centers. These people are trained professionals. They know how to take care of the hoist. They know how to maintain the hoist properly and to fix it when there are problems. They understand our warranty policies, and they can help you maintain your warranty for the hoist. A lot of people like to try to work on the hoist themselves. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but it would be a better step to have a warranty service center or qualified technician work on it. And if you're curious about the entertainment standards that are out there, I mentioned earlier ANSI E1.6-2. Right, that covers the manufacture and the inspection of electrical chain hoists. There's also ANSI E1.6-3. That is for the end users and how they're supposed to use the hoist properly. And if you go on to ESTA's website, tsp.esta.org, TSP stands for the Technical Standards Program, you can find a huge list of all kind of different entertainment-specific ANSI standards that are on there. Not just hoists either. There's one on wire rope ladders, smoke machines, speaker enclosures, all kinds of stuff for the entertainment industry that is designed to help us have recognized industry standards to keep things safe for both ourselves and the public. So go on that website and download that stuff for free.
That's an excellent resource. Thanks for sharing that, Brian.
So Brian, I got a couple Q&As here, and guys and gals, if you guys have any more, please keep them coming. I'm trying to get through them as best I can, but a couple ones that might benefit the entire group is how much pitting is too much pitting? I guess for removing surface rust, if they see pitting, is there a general rule of allowable pitting, or if there's any pitting, it's probably be replaced?
I would replace it if I see any pitting at all. Right? Compare it to a brand new one. You know, if you can, get a brand new piece, put it next to the one you just cleaned up, and if it looks significantly different, I would say replace it. Yeah, once you start having pitting, you're losing material.
Got it. Let's see, let's get another one here. Is it okay to paint the steel members of the brake to limit oxidation?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I thought that one was an interesting one too.
Yeah, I don't know if I could answer that without consulting our engineering department. But we have, as far as painting parts goes, we have recommended painting the suspension adapters inside the hoist, the little, what we call cowboy hats. But I've never considered the brake. I wouldn't paint anything that has laminations on it. You have the brake coil, which is in the middle. It's a coil of copper wire, and then around that you have the laminated pieces of steel, and those are sealed with a varnish. So as long as that varnish is intact, then they're pretty protected. So I wouldn't paint any of that, and I wouldn't paint anything that brake disc touches. So that doesn't really leave a lot of parts left to be painted. So my opinion would be no, you wouldn't. There aren't any parts in there that you could paint that would be, you know, more difficult to clean up.
Yeah, and I think overall, as long as you're doing a good enough job at your frequent inspections and things like that, there shouldn't be, even if there is condensation or water buildup in your hoist, it shouldn't be so long that it would start to rust and create pitting, I wouldn't imagine. But I tell you what, I know I've seen them out in the field, so I'm gonna ask that question to our engineers and see if we can get a more firm response on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think the rest of them, Brian, you've either answered live throughout the webinar, or they're more specific and might need some offline discussion. But one last question here. So, is there no IP ratings for hoists made prior to 2015?
Well, we did come out with IP54 around 2005 to 2007. I think we had our hoist tested for IP54, but that's just splashing water, right? That's not like, you know, that's accidental splashing of water onto the hoist, not, you know, leaving it out in the rain. So
yeah, great. So that 2015 date is just when the IP54 jumped to the IP66.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, we did the new gen first, and we did the classics. Now,
great.
Keep in mind, this is just Lodestars. This is not Pro Stars. No Pro Stars that we make are designed for, you know, outdoor use or exposure to water and things like that.
Okay. Great. Well, I think that wraps up the questions that I have for the group. I know, there's a couple questions on where you could purchase replacement gaskets and things like that. Any one of our distributors will be glad to help you out with that. And you can go to cm-et.com for our list of distribution. If you don't know who your distributor is, but then if you still struggle, me and Brian would be glad to help you out with that just the same.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, here is information about Brian and Nick and how you can reach them if you have any further questions. The website they're referring to is a CM Entertainment dedicated website, which we call cm-et.com. And that's where you can find the list of distributors he mentioned. And I also want to bring light to some upcoming classes we have. Brian is located at our Center of Excellence Training Center in Rock Lidditz. It's actually Lidditz, PA. We call it Rock Lidditz. It's the campus. And at this campus, he has several classes that he offers, and other people also contribute into those classes. We have, well, first of all, we have an online course that's, you can go 24/7 and take, which is our CM-ET Lodestar maintenance training. But in addition to that, on a regular basis, we have rope access workshops, fall protection classes at Rock Lidditz. In addition, we offer SPRAT level 1, 2, or 3 certification classes. There's one coming up in August. The other one, I believe, is sold out. And then we have more coming on the calendar all the time, so you can check it out. And lastly, we just set up 2 more CM-ET 5-day rigor boot camps. One will be in July and one will be in October. So if you're interested in possibly doing that, we encourage you to go to our website, which is on the bottom corner of our screen, which is just training.cmworks.com. And you'll find all the classes we have for both the industrial side as well as entertainment, and you can sign up. And if you have any questions about that, again, you can contact Brian or Nick. So with that, I just want to thank you. I know we're 11:43, so we're just a couple minutes left. We just want to thank you for participating today. Let us know if you have any questions. We're also very active on social media, so if you happen to be a digital person, go connect with us. We have 2 channels on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel, which we'll send you a link to after this webinar. We're active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus is no more. I need to get rid of that. Instagram, and we also have a blog with over 200 articles on there that you can reference. Some industrial focus, some entertainment focus. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you have a great rest of the week. And you will be getting a link from us soon. Any final comments, Brian or Nick?
No, I appreciate it. And we'll do another one soon.
Yeah, I got a couple questions to answer. Don't worry, I'm going to answer them for you guys. I'm just a little bit behind. Gisela mentioned our YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe to that if you get a chance. We're hopefully be coming out very shortly with a bunch of good instructional videos and tutorials and things like that. So when those are released, you'll get a little reminder to go check it out. So got a little handful of questions still got to answer, and I'll get to them very shortly for you guys.
Okay, so we'll hang out on the webinar. We're very respectful of your time. So if you need to jump off, we're done with what we're presenting. But Nick, like you said, he'll be answering a few more if you want to type them in. Nick, if there are any that you think would be beneficial for everybody, you're free to just go ahead and share them and answer them live, however you want to handle it. But again, if you want to keep asking questions, feel free to keep typing. We'll keep the webinar open a little while longer. But thanks again for your participation today, everyone.
Thank you.